Welcome to the new terrain where we map leadership in a changing world. Together, we'll explore the trends shaping the future of work, the problems businesses face, and how to unlock resilience and impact. In this three-part series, we've explored the rise of AI, the dynamics of intergenerational workplaces, and how businesses can stay connected to purpose while navigating the challenges in this rapidly changing landscape. Hi, I'm Rebekah Clark of Beautiful Soup, and I'm joined by my friends Anique Coffee and Leah Zalinski, co-founders of Gather and Grow. Each of us has a unique perspective on purpose, leadership, and systems, and through these candid conversations, we'll uncover actionable insights to help you lead with clarity, compassion, and purpose. This is more than a conversation, it's a roadmap for thriving in the face of change. I'm your host for today's conversation. Hello and welcome. And again, I'm joined by Anique and Leah. Hi there.
Hello.
Today, we're going to be discussing feminine leadership and purpose-driven business. We're living through some serious change right now. And when everything is shifting around us like this, it's exactly when leadership that's actually grounded in values, mission, and purpose becomes absolutely critical. We're seeing this massive paradigm shift from traditionally masculine leadership structures, think old school, top down, I'm the boss, just do what I say types of approaches. And they're just not working anymore. And as we've already been discussing in previous conversations, Gen Z in particular do not respond to this and won't tolerate it. So we're moving towards a season where feminine leadership values have an edge. Principles and practices that help purpose-driven organizations do what they do best, build trust, navigate all of this complexity from a place of quiet confidence, and drive the meaningful impact that they're set out to achieve. So let's get into this. Starting with you, Anique, what does feminine leadership mean to you? And what does it look like in practice?
I love this question. And I love when we were dreaming up this whole series that this was a big part of the conversation for us. So it's been exciting that this episode's been coming and this conversation is here. Um, it's a lot of what we talked about. It's a moving away from hierarchy to a more kind of network based leadership in my eyes, moving away from that down command and control towards these flatter, more relational structures. I think I want to be really careful in this conversation not to be too like gender normative about this, but the reality is that women are a lot more relational. We process things out loud quite a lot. We want to be in our communities and in our communes and our villages. There's this rise of the commune idea for through so many women lately, and it's because we really thrive in relational structures, and our influence comes from trust and collaboration, and that's very different than where leadership has been in the past. So I think that's part of it, this kind of networked approach to leadership and thinking a lot about trust and collaboration. And with that comes kind of the rise of relational intelligence. So not just the energetic and the emotional intelligence that we feel a lot, but they're kind of leaders are really being called to deepen those relational intelligence moments. So how they hold space, how they build belonging, how they foster psychological safety. And this is something that sometimes comes a little more naturally to women. So the more that we can bring that energy into the workplace, the better.
Absolutely. And Leah, do you have anything to add around that? Or how do you see this feminine approach being tied to business impact?
Yeah. In addition to just feminine leadership in the form of women in leadership, which we all agree there should be more of, there's also a trend towards the dynamic of feminine energy versus masculine energy, which all of us have, men and women. Feminine energy is more about receiving, and it's more about contemplating and more about allowing the alchemy of a situation to unfold as it's going to. It's much more intuition based. It's much more going with your gut. Masculine energy, again, is something we all have. Though that's the planning, that's the driving, that's the really forcing things through. most of us go back and forth between both things, right? You have to have some thinking time, you have to have some digestion time, and then it becomes time to act and time to move. One of the things that I've really been seeing with a lot of male leaders is their willingness to be able to pause, their willingness to be able to contemplate, their willingness to be able to get away from the hustle culture, realize that it's burning people out and that it's not actually that endlessly driving is not actually getting us where we need to go. And so being able to model things like vulnerability, being able to model things like not being 100% sure what the next step is going to be, those are things that are also really contributing to that same sense of this new kind of networked way of leading that Anique was just mentioning. And so, to be clear, it's not just about women in leadership roles, it's also about there being a level of openness and a willingness to consider other perspectives, a willingness to admit when somebody's wrong, and a reaction to just reject some of the toxicity that's built up over the last 10 or 20 years in the workplace. People are ready to break those systems down and they're just being rejected. It's not good enough anymore. And that's something that allows us to be able to create something new in its place.
I think it's that realness, isn't it, that you're talking about, and this encouragement almost that we are allowed to be our full selves. And I really liked that you mentioned intuition specifically, because I think in the past that's kind of been seen as, hocus pocus, or that's intuition. There's no place for that in business. But now we're actually seeing that being brought to the table and not only being accepted, but also being valued. Anique, what are some of the other kind of cultural and leadership shifts that you're seeing that really foster this more relational and empathetic approach?
I want to start with the intuition point because that's so important. That's part of the integration of feminine leadership for sure. It's not just about women in roles, but it is the embracing values like empathy, like intuition, like nurturing talent. And that creates this sort of long term stewardship alongside the traditional performance driven values. This doesn't mean we're going away from performance driven culture, it's just a different way of approaching it. So I think the intuition part is really interesting and definitely a part of the conversation. It's also something, if we kind of tap back into previous moments in our conversation of this AI plus human, we need the intuition in that case as well. For leaders at the leading edge of AI or just incorporating it more into their business, we need that moment of intuition, not just being data driven and spotting patterns and putting the puzzle together, but actually using our humanness, which is our intuition, to make decisions and run with it. So there's a really nice connection there. But there's something else around the changing expectations that you said, Leah, of people in leadership. People no longer want leaders who have all the answers. They want leaders who can listen, who can adapt, who can co create. And that means putting down the power dynamics that we're usually pretty comfortable with and those hierarchical structures, or just the idea that a leader's supposed to know it all. This is especially important for moments of complexity and uncertainty. Leaders are going to gain a lot of respect by turning towards their people in those moments of uncertainty and saying things like, I'm not sure what we're going to do here, but I know we have the answers in our team and we're going to figure it out together. And that's a huge shift that's been happening. And actually, I saw quite a lot of that during COVID when I was working in culture and leadership in 2020 and 2021, a lot of leaders turning towards their people in that moment of uncertainty and those unprecedented times. And we're here again in these uncertain, unprecedented times. And we need that again, the turning back towards our people. And then something else I'll say that we talk quite a lot about is this idea of trust being a growth driver. And there's something about that and feminine energy, this idea of trust becoming the currency of leadership within organizations, but also how businesses show up in society. We talked a little bit about this in our conversation. Leaders who build relational trust are the ones who are going to unlock the loyalty, unlock the creativity, unlock the resilience.
Yes, your reference to COVID there reminds me of an example where I think it was the chief exec of Cisco, who is a man. During COVID, he was on kind of team Zoom calls, having his granddaughter on his lap, and kind of signaling and normalizing. We're all at home, there's kids around. And so it is. It's like across finding these moments where people can relate to one another as well and bring that sense of humanity to our work. Leah, how do you think that businesses can embed on a kind of practical and implementation level these principles that we're talking about into systems and growth strategies?
Yeah. The biggest thing that we have seen lately is that long-term planning just isn't a thing anymore. People try to put plans in place and they are just required to take pivots and to take side routes and to do side quests and all of these other things because the future has changed so quickly and there continue to be things that you just couldn't have anticipated. And so having leaders who are more comfortable in ambiguity, having leaders who are able to navigate when things feel a little bit unclear and are able to adapt to that situation, that's something that allows the whole organization to really rally around the direction, regardless of how crystal clear it is. And so that's another thing from that command and control model. The command and control model really requires everyone following the same drumbeat, right? Literally, that was what drumbeats in war, they were to make sure that everybody was moving at the same pace. Now we see, and this kind of started with agile development and some of these other pod-based working styles, but it's now really organized around iteration and shared knowledge and being able to have movement between teams based on where things are going. And that's still structured. There's still methodology to that way of working, but it's much more oriented around being nimble, being able to execute quickly, being able to have informed, empowered, educated, knowledgeable workforce in combination that is not necessarily hierarchical. So when we think about systems and when we think about how teams are organized, being able to be reactive, but also proactive in how they are experimenting with the work that needs to be done is something that is incredibly important in this current moment.
It's been interesting to see that kind of shift around the language, which I had traditionally associated with startups, around nimble, agile sprints. But do you find that some of the bigger clients and corporates are starting to move in that way as well?
Yep. The one thing that stays the same and something that we talk to our clients about all the time is that the why is still super important. You have to know why you're doing what you're doing. But the what and the how is where there's a little bit more flexibility. And that's where inclusivity, to bring it back into what we were talking about before, inclusivity and having there be space for new ideas to bubble up from wherever they may come. Sometimes the most innovative things that leaders can do is to make space for those things because that may be what unlocks the next direction that you end up going in that's going to drive your business towards unlocking or breaking through something that's felt stuck in the past.
Yeah, that sense of there's no bad ideas. And you touched on psychological safety earlier. And I can see how important that is. I mean, that's critical for leaders to create these spaces where people do feel safe. They're not going to be ridiculed, chastised, shouted at, as might have happened in the past, so that people can kind of bring their best selves and their best ideas and just kind of see what happens as a result of that.
It's not just about showing up fully, it's also about feeling safe to take risks.
Mm.
When a team feels supported by their leaders, when they feel celebrated by their leaders, they have a little bit more spaciousness in how they tackle the problems that are on their plate. And instead of trying to hide or instead of trying to do the bare minimum, which is something that we've also seen in years past, you allow and empower people to be able to get creative and to really explore what could be possible, which is really energizing. It's energizing for a person, it's energizing for a team. And when those ideas are really treated seriously, it has a contagious effect on how the team performs overall. And really that energy can come from anywhere. It's not necessarily just driven by the leadership, although it's helpful when leaders are also in that headspace. It really can galvanize the power of a team in a way that's been very unexpected in other more rigid hierarchical organizations.
We've been talking a lot about the intergenerational workforce across these conversations. And so, Anique, I'm wondering, how can leadership styles evolve that really do empower Gen Z so that they can thrive in these rapidly changing work environments?
I think there's a really good story that popped to mind that I'll share in a second. But I think one thing for us all to keep in mind who aren't Gen Z is that this generation has grown up with rapid change as the norm. they have really been at the front of this the whole time. Then as they're entering the workforce, this is their norm, right? This like fast pace, always changing kind of culture in business is their norm. And so there's leaders who adopt more adaptability to as what is basically what's needed in the rapid change, more curiosity, more resilience, instead of the rigidity of this is the plan or this is the way we do things here, or these are the hours you need to work in order to make this change happen. The people who choose the opposite of that are going to be the ones who create the environments where Gen Z thrives. And the story I want to share is recently an advisor that I work with was going through a huge change, a very like senior leadership, big change at work. And she has a team, and a lot of these people are Gen Z folks. And even though they're growing up with rapid change as the norm, it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. And so there was a lot of uncertainty on her team. And instead of telling them to sit down and be quiet, she just stopped everything and created space for them to be heard and understood. So tapping back into your point, Leah, about this inclusivity, that idea that like giving people space to be heard and understood is what creates the psychological safety, it creates the loyalty, and makes sure that people feel safe at work so that they can be resilient in the face of change. And there's so many leaders who don't do that. And there's so many, leaders, we've been on all hands before where leaders just talk at you for an hour and there's not a single moment for curiosity or questions to be answered. And that really changes the dynamic of a team. And it's so important. And the real thing with Gen Z is they expect to be heard. They expect to be a part of shaping workplace culture. And so leadership that empowers them to kind of co-create and has this sort of more distributed decision making are the ones who are going to win with this generation.
There's something to be said, isn't there, about leadership visibility, whether you have one team that's physically all in the same office or if you have remote workers around the world. It's around finding those opportunities for authentic touch points so that you're in kind of an ongoing conversation, right, with your teams and people actually know who you are. Because I remember when I used to work in government and you'd be working with senior policy officials, or there'd be kind of these faceless people that the workers on the ground, as it were, never really saw them. But I can see how that's really important across the board. I'm also thinking of schools even. We touched on school and education a little bit yesterday, how seeing the head teacher or the principal, having access to them from an early age starts to really kind of mold and nurture some of these relationships where you do have a bit of a natural hierarchy. It's often the reality. I mean, I'm wondering, do you have any thoughts around that and visibility and access to leadership, Leah?
Yeah, and to me, it's not just about the leaders, right? It's very important for leaders to have one-on-one relationships with their teams, no question. But a leader's job is also to be able to forge relationships, knowledge sharing, and collaboration within their team as well, between teams. And that's something that I think is really just as much about that visibility, being not just the voice of their own team. A lot of times you'd see the team doing the work, like you were saying, the team on the ground doing the work, and then the leader would be the voice. I'm seeing a lot more trends of leaders using their voice. They're using their place at the table to bring other people with them. And that kind of rising together really does so much to be able to cultivate the leaders of tomorrow as much as it is about reinforcing their own position as leaders, right? And that's some of that kind of command and control leadership, is that power was really centralized with one person, generally a man at the top. And now that isn't the case anymore. People are bringing others with them. They're leaving space. They're making room for other people to be able to practice those leadership skills that don't develop overnight. And so when we're seeing it really work, when we are seeing the visibility and the privilege and the power and the expertise and having that be modeled actively in a way that the next generation of leaders can be practicing it alongside, that's when we've really seen an exposure and an overall range of leadership that has become incredibly powerful for that next generation of talent.
It's like less command, more coaching is what you're kind of speaking to, which we love, music to our ears, but that sort of leadership style shift towards mentorship and empowerment rather than the like, I'm going to rule the roost here. And it is the like, get out of the way of your people, like let
Yeah.
them have the stage. Yeah.
And in this remote world where so many people are working in either hybrid environments or entirely remote, or even across time zones and across geographies where culture is different, there's a lot of informal mentorship that's kind of been lost, right?
Mm,
When we were all starting our careers, we were in offices, we were there for really long days, we were in an opportunity to be able to witness other people on difficult phone calls, for example, or we were able to be in the room when things were being discussed and debated. And so we were able to kind of acquire some of those skills just by witnessing it. It's harder to do that now. And so being able to have deliberate and inclusive mentorship opportunities that are really designed towards practicing the skills that other people are still acquiring, that effort takes a little bit of design. It takes a little bit of intentionality, but it is absolutely an investment that pays off every time.
yeah. That incidental learning, as I call it, is so valuable and so rich. How do we find ways to adapt so that people coming in can still have that experience? So, Leah, how can businesses authentically connect to purpose, with purpose kind of being the thread through all of our conversations? How can they connect to purpose when they're addressing challenges like employee disengagement and some of the societal issues like the cost of living crisis that so many are dealing with?
Yeah, one of the things that I have seen is that people are really getting fed up with having to just kind of choke on the existing norms that have existed in a lot of corporations. And what they're doing is they're leaving in droves to either start their own businesses, to be able to join forces with other people who are in similar situations to begin something new. That I think is something that the corporate world really needs to be paying attention to. There are two paths. Either we embrace this entrepreneurial spirit that so many people are demonstrating. It's never been easier to start a business. It's never been easier to spin something up thanks to all of the technological advances. One person can now hold many different skills and responsibilities thanks to technology being able to fill in the gaps in their own expertise. And so leaning into that and allowing that spirit to thrive is something that I think we're going to continue to see more and more. But within the corporate structure, within existing businesses, there needs to be more of an emphasis put on inclusive, experimental behaviors that really provide benefits that are supportive of an entire person, that show career pathing, that really allow people to imagine where their career is going to progress over time, to be able to co-create those things, to give somebody the empowerment to demonstrate skills and passions that may be peripheral to their job description and still have those be valuable. There's so many different ways that we can empower teams and that we can include them in creating the future of organizations. And that kind of respect, candidly, is really what it is. It's respecting your workforce, having them be included in those conversations and being able to orient around things like purpose. Why are we here? What are we trying to do? How can we do this in a creative way? Those are the roles of leaders. The roles of leaders is to be able to charter the course, but it's the power of the people that create the momentum for us to be able to get there. And leaders are more and more now honoring that. And that is, I think, really going to be structurally how we continue to be able to go down this path, is including the power of the people into the decision making that drives businesses forward.
Yeah, I think it's the human design element, isn't it? That's often considered in product or service development. We need to see more of that kind of human design thinking when considering your teams and workplace.
Absolutely.
So, we've talked a lot about what leadership today needs to look like, but we also want to acknowledge that this isn't new. There are always challenges, there are always things that are shifting, and each generation has its own problems to solve. And while this feels critical in the here and now, and we've talked about AI and all of the different things that are happening so rapidly, I think we all agree that these themes or these moments are timeless. And it's really the gift and the opportunity is in how each generation tackles this and shows up for these different chances for change. So with that, thank you so much for this amazing conversation. That kind of rounds off our third and final episode for this series. If you're ready to lead with intention and thrive in the face of change, then join us in this conversation. You can watch the other episodes in this series, you can share your thoughts, and also connect with us to get any support that you might need on your own journey. Let's all build a future where businesses don't just survive, they thrive. In the show notes, we'll include links to the other episodes in the series and where you'll be able to find us on LinkedIn. And until next time, I'm Rebekah, and this was The New Terrain.